The sound of shattering china echoed through the dining room as Martha stood motionless, hot chocolate seeping through her blouse and burning her skin. At 67, she had spent 4 decades cooking, cleaning, and caring for a family that now stared at her with cold indifference. In that moment of stark clarity, as her grandson's tears were comforted by another woman sitting in her chair, Martha realized she had become invisible in her own home for years. Martha had been the silent backbone of the Collins family. On her grandson Tommy's 6th birthday, while laughter and music filled the living room, she labored alone in the kitchen preparing his favorite dishes. The stove hissed and steamed as she moved back and forth like a waitress on a Saturday night, chopping, stirring, checking the oven. Her back ached and her hands were swollen from hours of work, but she carried on. She even had exciting news to share earlier that day. She had won $10,000 on a scratch-off ticket, but her moment of joy never came. When Tommy burst into the kitchen complaining about the cake being late, he impulsively threw his soda at Martha, instead of concern. Her husband James called from the living room. "Oh, come on, he's just a kid. Don't make a scene." That dismissive comment was the first crack in the dam of her patience. The final blow came when Martha entered the dining room to find Helen James's high school sweetheart, whose husband had recently passed away, sitting comfortably beside him. Helen had somehow slipped into Martha's life and role with disturbing ease, even being called Grandma Helen by Tommy. As Martha served the meal she had spent hours preparing, James criticized her for taking too long, while complimenting Helen on her appearance. "Let's get a divorce," Martha said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. When Tommy later ran after her with a mug of hot chocolate that spilled and burned her chest, the family blamed Martha for upsetting him. No one asked if she was hurt. They only saw her as the problem. That night, Martha walked out the door and never looked back. She checked into a hotel, sought medical treatment for her burns, and began researching getting divorced at 60s. The online support she received from strangers felt more like family than the people she had served for decades. After finalizing her divorce, Martha used her lottery winnings to start anew. She traveled to places she'd only seen on television, the hot springs of Yellowstone, the northern lights in Alaska, the beaches of Key West. She bought a cozy lakeside home, adopted a cat named Charlie, and became active in her community. For the first time, Martha understood what it meant to be needed, not used. When her daughter called, demanding a share of the lottery money, Martha calmly refused. When James tried to reconnect after his relationship with Helen fell apart, she blocked his number. After a lifetime of pleasing others, Martha had finally learned the most valuable lesson: it's never too late to choose yourself. "I don't need anyone to tell me who I am, what I should do, or whether I'm worth anything," Martha reflected as she watched the sunset from her kitchen window. At 67, her life hadn't ended. It had finally begun. I could hear the jubilant chaos beyond the kitchen door, children shrieking with laughter, the crinkling of wrapping paper, and the thumping bass of pop music vibrating through the walls. It was my grandson Tyler's 6th birthday, and the house was packed with guests celebrating his special day. But I wasn't part of that celebration. Instead, I was hidden away in the kitchen, performing the invisible labor that kept the party running. The wooden door served as a barrier between two worlds, the joyful celebration where my family basked in the warmth of togetherness, and my solitary domain of endless work. The stove hissed and steamed behind me as I moved back and forth like a waitress during the Saturday night rush. My hands were raw from chopping vegetables, my clothes splattered with oil, and my back refusing to straighten fully after hours hunched over the counter. "Mom," my daughter Emily called from the living room, her voice barely penetrating the thick wooden door. "Don't forget Tyler's favorite vanilla pudding. And hey, I brought back some soybeans from Chicago. Can you use those in your baked beans and beef dish? God, I haven't had that in forever. Oh, and could you do a chicken pot pie, too? Yours is better than any restaurant I've been to." I offered a faint smile that no one could see, the kind that looks genuine unless you examine it closely. Every dish they requested required hours of preparation, marinating, slow roasting, making dough from scratch. This wasn't just a meal. It was an endurance trial disguised as love. I sighed, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked to the door. "David," I called to my husband, "I've got way too much going on in here. Can you come wash this cut of meat for me?" The laughter outside didn't pause. No answer came. I called again, louder this time, but still nothing. After a moment's hesitation, I gave up, rolled up my sleeves, and returned to the cutting board. 3 hours later, the kitchen resembled a war zone. Oil spattered the floor, dirty pots towered in the sink, and my hands were red and swollen from endless chopping. Even with all this chaos, I had managed to prepare a feast: slow roasted beef, hand-folded chicken pot pies, Tyler's favorite vanilla pudding, and the special bean dish Emily had requested. Before calling everyone to the table, I took a deep breath, smoothed down my apron, and practiced my smile. I had exciting news to share, something that might bring a little joy of my own into the room. While at the grocery store that morning, I'd picked up a scratch-off lottery ticket on a whim. It's Tyler's birthday, I had thought. Maybe I'll get lucky. As the stew simmered, I'd scratched it against the counter and froze in disbelief. $10,000. I'd checked it 3 times and verified it on the lottery website. It was real. I planned to announce it during dinner, make it a celebration for everyone. Nothing extravagant, but enough for each family member to receive a little something. A birthday gift for Tyler, and perhaps a small reward for myself after all these years. But as I prepared to carry the final dishes to the dining room, Tyler burst into the kitchen, his face scrunched into a frown. "You didn't bring out the cake," he snapped. "I don't want your food anymore." And before I could react, he grabbed his cup of soda from the counter and flung it at me. The sticky liquid soaked through my blouse, and the cup shattered against the tile floor. I stood there dripping, my palms burning from shock, when David shouted from the living room, "Oh, come on. He's just a kid. Don't make a scene." In that moment, something inside me quietly flickered out, like someone had yanked the cord from a lamp. No light, no warmth, no more pretending. I was invisible to them, not as a person with feelings and dreams, but as a function, a service that existed solely for their convenience and comfort. As I forced myself to swallow the sting in my chest and carried out the last dish to the table, I wondered if now might still be the right moment to share my lottery news. But that thought quickly vanished as I stepped into the dining room and saw what awaited me there. A scene that would finally push me to choose myself after 67 years of choosing everyone else. I still remember how my fingers trembled as I scratched the silver coating off that $2 lottery ticket. It was just a whim, a small indulgence I'd allowed myself while picking up groceries for my grandson Max's birthday party. Maybe I'll get lucky, I thought, tucking it into my purse as the cashier handed me my change. Hours later, as the beef stew simmered on the stove and the homemade pie crust chilled in the refrigerator. I leaned against the kitchen counter and decided to check my ticket. The rhythmic sounds of children playing and music blaring from the living room created a strange backdrop as I revealed the numbers one by one. Then it happened. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the winning combination $10,000. I blinked hard, convinced it had to be some kind of printing error. With shaking hands, I scanned the ticket 3 times and checked the lottery website twice. But there was no mistake. I had won $10,000 from a $2 scratch-off bought at the corner gas station. In that moment, standing alone in my flour-dusted apron with swollen hands and an aching back, I felt something crack open inside me. It wasn't just about the money, though God knows we could use it. It was like receiving a personal message from the universe. You don't have to keep living like this. $10,000, not enough to retire on, certainly, but enough to make a difference. Enough to perhaps put a down payment on a small place of my own. Enough to take that painting class I'd been eyeing at the community center. Enough to finally visit my sister in Colorado. Or maybe I'd share it with the family, a little something for each of them, including a nice chunk for Max's college fund. I decided to announce it during dinner. I would make it fun, surprising them all with this unexpected stroke of fortune. The thought of their reactions brought a genuine smile to my face, the first real one I'd felt in months. For once, I would be bringing something to the table besides food that would soon be consumed and forgotten. I imagined their faces lighting up with excitement. I pictured James, my husband of 40 years, looking at me with pride instead of impatience. I envisioned my daughter Elizabeth hugging me tight and little Max jumping up and down with childish glee. We would celebrate together, making plans for this modest windfall that had fallen into our laps. But that announcement never came. As I put the finishing touches on Max's favorite vanilla pudding, he came barging into the kitchen, his face contorted with impatience and entitlement. "You didn't bring out the cake," he snapped, his voice sharp with accusation. "I don't want your food anymore." Before I could explain that I was just about to serve dessert, Max grabbed his full cup of soda from the counter and flung it at me. I don't know if he meant to hit me or not, but the sticky liquid splashed across my chest, soaking through my shirt. I gasped and stepped backward, colliding with the cabinet behind me. The cup hit the tile floor and shattered into pieces. In the shocked silence that followed, I waited for anyone to come check on me. Instead, I heard James shouting from the living room, "Oh, come on. He's just a kid. Don't make a scene." I stood there dripping with cola, my winning lottery ticket still tucked safely in my pocket, as something inside me went very, very quiet. No one came in. No one looked up. They were still eating cake, still scrolling on their phones as if I didn't exist. That quiet flicker of hope I'd been nurturing all afternoon simply died like someone had yanked the cord from a lamp. No light, no warmth, no more pretending. I forced myself to swallow the sting in my chest, pulled my expression back into place, and carried out the last dish, debating whether now might still be the right moment to share my news. But as I stepped out of the kitchen and saw what awaited me at the dining table, I realized the lottery ticket wasn't just a windfall, it was an escape route, and I would need every penny of it for myself. I stepped out of the kitchen, carrying the last dish I had labored over for hours. The familiar weight of the serving platter in my hands did nothing to prepare me for the unfamiliar sight that awaited me at the dining table. Sitting next to Richard, my husband of 40 years, was a woman I hadn't seen in decades. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, her makeup impeccable, her posture relaxed like someone who belonged there. She turned her head, smiled at me, and said softly, "Hi, Eleanor." It was Patricia Harper. Back in high school, she was the girl Richard had adored from afar. He'd written her love letters and sketched her face in his notebooks. I'd recently seen her husband's obituary on Facebook. And now, here she was, sitting at my table, in my seat, like she'd been waiting for me to step aside. Before I could greet her, Richard cut in with a sharp glance. "What took you so long?" "People are starving." The words hit me like a slap, not a greeting, not a word of concern, just a reprimand, as if my hours in the kitchen were nothing but an inconvenience. Then he turned to Patricia, carefully placing a rib onto her plate, and smiled a smile I hadn't seen on his face in years. "Try this. Patricia, she's not great at much, but I'll give her this, she knows how to cook." Just like that, I was an outsider in my own home. Before I could respond, my grandson Jackson stood up and yelled, "Grandma was sneaking food in the kitchen. That's why I'm starving." My daughter Lisa laughed. "Oh, really? And how do you know that, sweetie?" Jackson puffed out his chest. "I saw her. She was eating all by herself and didn't give me any." My fingers trembled against the tablecloth. I hadn't had a single bite all day, yet to them, I was the greedy one. What hurt more wasn't the accusation, but the lie. Jackson was starting to lie to earn their laughter, making up stories at my expense. I said gently, "Jackson, Grandma didn't sneak any food." "Sweetie, that's not true. I was in the kitchen because I didn't even get to finish some of the dishes." Richard slammed his hand on the table, standing up abruptly. "Are you serious? He's 6 years old. You're really picking a fight with a child." He glared at me like I was the one ruining dinner. I looked around the table. Not one person spoke up for me. Lisa came over and patted Jackson's back, her expression impatient. "He's 6. He doesn't know any better." She looked at me like I was some unhinged woman lashing out at a child. Jackson's lips trembled, and then the tears came. He started sobbing and ran straight into Patricia's arms. She didn't hesitate for a second. She scooped him up, holding him close like he was her own grandson, stroking his back and murmuring, "Oh, Jackson, don't be sad. Don't cry. Grandma Patricia's right here." She said it so smoothly, so naturally, like this had always been her place. I stood there, my fingernails digging into my palms, my shoulders locked tight. In that moment, I understood what was happening. I wasn't just being replaced as a wife. I was being erased entirely. I searched their expressions for something, anything, a trace of empathy. But all I saw were furrowed brows and averted eyes, like they were waiting for me to just stop making a scene. Then Jackson pointed at me through his sniffles and shouted, "I don't want Grandma anymore. I want Grandma Patricia. She's nicer." I stood motionless, stunned, and caught the faintest twitch of a smile on Patricia's lips. Subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. That wasn't kindness. It was triumph. I took a deep breath, a quiet one. And in that breath, I let go of something invisible and heavy that had been holding me in place for far too long. "William," I said, my voice steady and low, "let's get a divorce." The moment the words left my mouth, the dining room fell into silence. All eyes turned to me like I had just detonated something sacred in the middle of dinner. William scoffed first, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that I had grown to despise over our 40 years together. "Margaret, you're 67. Do you think you're still in your 20s or something?" He paused, then curled his lips into a sneer. You say things like that and don't worry. People will laugh. Who the hell even cares if you want a divorce at your age? I turned to look at him, at his hand resting casually on Rebecca's thigh, like it belonged there. He didn't even notice I was watching. The realization hit me with startling clarity. This wasn't a family gathering. This was a performance, and I was the character they'd already written out of the script. Should I be apologizing, I asked, my voice steady. For what? For not shutting up and playing chef one more day, or for finally realizing just how heartless this family has become? I wasn't yelling, but every word landed like stone. All of you like to pretend this is a family. But the truth is, you wrote me out of it a long time ago. Then I looked Rebecca straight in the eye. Your husband's funeral was barely a week ago, and here you are sitting at the head of my table, hugging my grandson like you were born to it. If you're not embarrassed, then I'll be embarrassed for you. Her smile faltered. She opened her mouth to respond, but William grabbed her arm before she could speak. I didn't wait. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I'm going to change, I said, my voice as even as ever. There's an Uber coming to pick me up soon. And as I climbed the steps, I added without looking back, this house, you all enjoy it. I'm done. William's face darkened instantly, like something inside him had been set on fire. He shot to his feet, and his wine glass slammed against the table with a sharp crack, sending a splash of red across the white tablecloth. Who do you think you're humiliating? He hissed, jaw clenched, voice low and laced with fury. You really dare talk to Rebecca like that? She's here for Oliver's birthday, not to be your emotional punching bag. He started toward me, his eyes burning with the kind of rage that had been simmering for years, now teetering at the edge. You're going to apologize to her right now. His hand lifted, slow and stiff, almost mechanical, like it didn't belong to him anymore. But it never landed. Not because I flinched, because I didn't move at all. I stood there, chin lifted, eyes locked on his, unmoving. The air in the room vanished. The silence was thick, absolute. Go ahead, I said, voice steady. Hit me. Might as well pay me back for all those years in one swing. His expression faltered. His fist hovered for another breath, then dropped limply to his side. He didn't hit me, but he lost not to me, but to the woman he thought would never raise her voice. The one he thought would always take it. You want me to apologize? I won't. I swept my gaze across the room. Melissa, her husband Greg, Rebecca, and little Oliver with his tear-streaked cheeks. This isn't me throwing a tantrum. This is me seeing things clearly finally. This house hasn't been mine in a very long time. I walked to the entryway, grabbed my coat and purse from the bench. Behind me, William barked. If you walk out that door, you won't have anywhere to go tonight. Where do you think you'll end up? No one else will put up with you like I have. I didn't look back. My voice came out cold, detached. You're right. You've been incredibly tolerant. You've tolerated another woman eating my food in my house while my grandson calls her grandma. Bravo. As I opened the door, the evening breeze swept in, sharp and brisk, washing over me like a baptism. I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me, sealing off decades of sacrifice behind a final quiet snap. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, and it felt like freedom. I was heading toward the front door, my fingers just brushing the handle, when I heard the rapid pattering of small feet behind me and a desperate voice calling, "Grandma, Don't go. I turned instinctively. Ethan was running toward me, a half-full mug of hot chocolate clutched in his small hands, the one Susan had given him moments earlier. He ran too fast, his excitement making him clumsy. His foot caught on the edge of the living room rug. And in that slow-motion moment of horror, I watched as the mug jolted forward in his grasp. The steaming liquid arced through the air and splashed directly across my chest. The pain was immediate and shocking. The near-scalding hot chocolate soaked through my blouse, searing against my skin. I gasped and lost my balance, landing hard on the floor near the front door. For 2 excruciating seconds, the room fell completely silent. Then Ethan froze and burst into tears, loud, shrill wails that seemed to pierce through the shocked stillness. I hadn't even processed the burning sensation spreading across my chest when I heard him sobbing between hiccuping breaths. "Bad Grandma, I'm not letting you leave. You don't love me anymore." His mug rolled to a stop at my feet, chocolate still seeping across the hardwood floor. My chest was drenched, my blouse clinging uncomfortably to my skin, sticky, painful, humiliating. I tried to push myself up, bracing against the floor, but my hand accidentally brushed against Ethan's leg. He stumbled backward, landing on the floor beside me, crying even louder than before. Jennifer rushed over and pulled him up, casting a sharp glance down at me. The look on her face wasn't concern for my injury, it was accusation. "Mom, he's just a kid. Was all this really necessary?" Her words stung worse than the burn. "You flipped out, made a scene, and now you've scared him into falling." I blinked in disbelief. She wasn't asking if I was hurt. She was blaming me for what had happened. "You really think he threw that drink on you on purpose?" She continued, her voice hard. "You're the one who stormed out in a tantrum. He panicked. What did you expect?" I looked up at my daughter, my chest tight with pain, both physical and emotional, but no words came. Then Susan approached, her designer shoes clicking precisely against the floor. She crouched down beside Ethan, wrapping him in her arms with a practiced, soothing tone. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's get you changed, and this afternoon we'll go pick out those superhero Legos you like. How's that sound?" She carried him to the couch, gently dabbing his face and hands with tissues, comforting him with a smile so effortless it seemed rehearsed, like a woman auditioning for the perfect grandma role. And I just sat there on the floor, soaking wet, shaking, left out like an unwanted prop in someone else's family portrait. The pain wasn't just in my skin anymore. It was in the realization that in this place, at this table, with these people, I had never truly had a seat. I slowly got to my feet, the front of my blouse stained dark and clinging to my burned skin. My fingers still trembled, but my voice came out calm, too calm. Later, at the hospital. A doctor in her 30s with a no-nonsense manner examined the angry red blisters forming on my chest. "Ma'am, this is a pretty severe burn from hot liquid," she observed with a frown. "Do you want us to contact someone for you?" I forced a thin, tired smile. "No need, boy," I said quietly. "I live alone." As the doctor cleaned and dressed my wound, I realized that the searing pain had pulled something deeper out of me, something old and heavy that had been buried for too long. When the cool air from the vent swept over my freshly bandaged skin, I felt something begin to heal, not just the burn, but somewhere deeper, somewhere I'd neglected for far too many years. I stood on the curb outside what had been my home for 40 years, the evening breeze cooling the tears that had finally broken free. My chest still burned where the hot chocolate had scalded my skin, but a different kind of warmth was spreading through me, the heat of determination, of a decision finally made. With trembling fingers, I opened the Uber app on my phone, a luxury I'd never allowed myself before. Harold had always insisted we take the bus or he'd drive. "Why waste money on a cab when we have a perfectly good car?" he'd say. Never mind that he was the only one who ever got behind the wheel. The car arrived quickly, a silver sedan with a friendly driver who didn't ask questions when he saw my reddened eyes and the damp stain across my blouse. I slid into the back seat, leaned my head against the window, and exhaled a long, heavy breath that I hadn't realized I'd been holding in for years. No more waiting in the cold at the bus stop. No more standing in line clutching transfer passes. No more asking permission for every small expense. Just sitting here, choosing my own ride, my own route. For the first time in decades, I felt how weightless it was to make my own decisions. By the time I got to the hospital, my chest was blistered and red. The fabric of my shirt stuck to my skin, and every breath felt like it scraped bone. The doctor, a woman in her 30s, with a calm, no-nonsense air, gave me one glance and frowned. "Ma'am, this is a pretty severe burn. Hot liquid." She applied ointment with gentle hands. "Do you want us to contact someone for you?" I forced a thin, tired smile. "No need. I live alone." The words felt strange on my tongue, a lie that would soon become truth. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but instead just nodded and continued gathering supplies. I lay back on the exam table and let her clean the wound. When the alcohol touched raw skin, I sucked in a sharp breath, but the pain felt cleansing, like it was pulling something deeper out of me, something old, heavy, buried. A chill from the air vent swept over the gauze, stinging and soothing all at once. Half an hour later, I stepped out of the hospital into the amber dusk. The sky was dimming, the air cooler. I opened my phone and booked a room at a small hotel across town, an old inn in the historic district. $138 a night. Harold would have scoffed. "Do you have no concept of money? One night here costs more than a week's groceries." But as I lay on that clean, soft mattress, freshly showered, dressed in new pajamas I'd purchased at the hotel gift shop, buried in a sea of pillows no one else had claimed, I felt something entirely new. It was called belonging to myself. Next to me on the nightstand was my lottery ticket, that miraculous $10,000 windfall that had appeared just when I needed it most. I'd planned to share it. College fund for Ethan, a down payment to help Amanda with a house, maybe something practical for Harold and me for retirement. But no, not a cent. They had given me no kindness. I owed them no generosity. This money, this unexpected blessing, was my ticket to freedom. With it, I would build something I'd never had before, a life that was entirely my own. I unlocked my phone and typed into the search bar, "Getting divorced at 67. What now?" The first result was a Reddit post titled, "My mom got divorced at 62. That's when her life really began." As I read the encouraging comments flooding in, my eyes welled with tears. Strangers on the internet felt more like family than the people I'd spent decades serving. And suddenly, I felt lighter. Who said life couldn't start at 67? I stared at my phone screen in disbelief. The photo of Thomas and Elaine had gone viral overnight. There she was, wearing his button-down shirt, bent slightly as she wiped down the dining room floor, my dining room floor in my house. She looked perfectly at home, her silver hair catching the light, her smile radiating warmth as if she'd always belonged there. Thomas had captioned it, "Some feelings never fade." After all these years, I thought I'd lost her forever. High school butterflies. 40 years later, they've grown roots. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. Just like that, decades of shared life meals cooked, bills paid, a child raised, a grandchild loved were erased in one carefully crafted social media post. I was no longer a person with a history. I had become a plot device, the cold, unwanted placeholder wife in someone else's second chance fairy tale. Within 24 hours, their love story had exploded online. The local TV station invited them onto a talk show called Still Got It, a feel-good segment spotlighting late-in-life romances. I turned on the television the night it aired and caught it just as it began. Thomas sat there in a navy blue suit, his hair slicked back with styling gel, a touch of foundation softening the creases on his face. Beside him, Elaine wore a soft lavender sweater and pearl earrings, her expression gentle and composed. Tonight's guests are a very special couple. The host beamed. Childhood sweethearts who lost each other for 50 years and found each other again at 67. Thomas looked directly into the camera and smiled that tired, romantic smile of a man who'd endured life before finally finding peace. Elaine and I were classmates in middle school. I had a crush on her back then, but I was shy, and my family was strict, so I never said a word. She had this floral dress I still remember like it was yesterday. He turned to her, taking her hand delicately. She was braver than me. She found me. She made this happen. The host's eyes glistened. So, you were never married in the years in between. Thomas hesitated, then gave a sheepish little laugh soaked in fake humility. Actually, it was an arrangement, something my parents pushed for. We got by. But honestly, if it hadn't been for the kids, I would have left a long time ago. My chest tightened as I watched. Just like that. 40 years of marriage reduced to an arrangement, and I was no longer Catherine, the woman who had stood by him through job losses and health scares, who had raised our daughter and helped with our grandson. I was just a footnote, a mistake to be corrected in the grand narrative of his true love story. Within hours, the segment went viral. TikTok edits hit the trending page. They found each other again after 55 years. My heart can't take it. She's 67 and I'd still marry her. Wow, this is what love looks like when it's meant to be. Thomas and Elaine launched a video channel called Our Golden Years. In their first clip, he wore an apron while stirring soup. She stood beside him slicing vegetables. They played soft jazz in the background and titled the video, Lunch with Your Favorite Silver-Haired Couple. The kitchen was mine, my countertops, my pots, my recipe for bean stew that I'd perfected over decades. The comments were a stream of worship. She's so gentle, you can tell she loves him. Grandpa is aging like fine wine. I'm crying. True love gets a second shot. A few voices slipped through. Didn't he have a wife? Kids? Wasn't she raising their grandkid before they split? But those were quickly buried under a wave of pastel hearts and #couple goals. I sat at my rented apartment's dining table watching their video for the third time. I didn't cry, but I felt scorched, like someone had poured boiling water across my chest all over again. They were turning love into lighting and filters and background music, and I didn't even get a name, just her, that vague shadow he used to live with. I hadn't even found the strength to tell my own story before the person I once loved most delivered the final blow. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, I saw it a video posted by Sarah, my only daughter, the child I had carried, nursed, and raised with every ounce of love I possessed. She was sitting in the living room, my living room, with the throw pillows I had embroidered and the photo wall I had arranged frame by frame over the years. Little Aiden was curled in her lap, his eyes downcast. The familiar setting made what came next all the more painful. Sarah hesitated briefly before speaking, but then her expression shifted into that polished, camera-ready tone she'd always been good at. "My mother," she began, her voice measured and regretful, "has always had a strong personality. That day, Aiden just wanted to bring her a cup of hot cocoa, but she reacted really aggressively. He ended up getting pushed." My breath caught in my throat as she continued. It took a while for the bruise to heal. Aiden, as if on cue, nodded solemnly. "I don't like Grandma. She yells and throws plates. Grandma Carolyn never does that." The comments came fast, biting and brutal. Emotional abuser vibes. "She looks like she'd be hard to live with. No wonder George left." And she destroyed the whole family atmosphere. I sat on my tiny rental couch, phone in hand, reading every word in silence. I didn't feel angry. I felt gutted. None of these strangers had been there. None of them saw the moment the cup spilled or who had been burned. But with a few edited sentences, Sarah had transformed me from beloved grandmother to villain. The truth was so different from her narrative. I hadn't pushed Aiden. He had fallen after accidentally splashing me with scalding hot chocolate. The only person with a burn was me, my chest still healing from second-degree burns that had required medical attention. Yet somehow, in Sarah's retelling, I had become the aggressor and Aiden the victim. What hurt most wasn't the lies themselves, but the calculated way she delivered them. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a heated moment. This was deliberate character assassination from my own flesh and blood. My daughter choosing to publicly malign me rather than acknowledge the painful reality of what had happened in our family. I clenched the phone, my thumb hovering over the comment button. What could I possibly say in my defense? That my grandson accidentally burned me, that my husband had already moved another woman into my home while we were still legally married, that my daughter had stood by and watched it all happen without a word of protest. Instead, I scrolled through short-form video tutorials, learning about content strategy, platform algorithms, and how to make my voice heard. Finally, I tapped Upload Video. In the yellow light of my kitchen, I recorded a simple clip. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out clearly. "Hi, I'm George's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and Aiden's biological grandmother. I just want to say that not everything you're seeing is the full truth." The views barely trickled in. Disappointed, I was about to close the page when a private message popped up from a user named @TruthMatters. "Ma'am, I saw your video. No one's going to find it unless you use the right keywords, names, events, hashtags. Trust me." She attached a screenshot with a revised title suggestion. I followed her advice, changed the cover image, and uploaded a new version, George Reynolds, "You're playing the hero." Maybe file the divorce first. I added a photo of my hospital diagnosis, a close-up of my healing burn, and a clipped, quiet voiceover. Yes, I overreacted when the hot chocolate hit me. But tell me, after 30 years of being silent, serving, and shrinking, who wouldn't break just once after being thrown out of her own home? Within minutes, the video had thousands of views. My truth was finally being heard. The morning after my video response began gaining traction, I sat at my small rental apartment's kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring at my phone in disbelief. The view count had crossed 10,000, then 50,000, then 100,000 overnight. People were sharing my story, not Albert and Judith's manufactured romance, not Emily's carefully crafted character assassination, but my truth. I had done something I'd never done before. I had shown evidence. The medical report with its clinical description of second-degree burns across my chest, the photograph of my healing wound, red and raw, the hospital discharge papers with the date and time clearly visible, no filters, no music, no tearful monologues, just facts that couldn't be disputed. She posted her medical records. She's speaking with receipts. One commenter wrote, "Wait, they're not even divorced yet. What kind of true love is this?" Wrote another, "Loving again is fine, but don't erase the woman who came before." Of course, there were still critics. She admitted to pushing the kid, and we're supposed to feel sorry for her. I didn't argue with them. Instead, I uploaded a second post again with photo evidence and a calm voice. No filters, no emotional manipulation. Just me sitting under a dim floor lamp, eyes steady. I did push him, I acknowledged. And if I could go back to that day, I'd control myself better. You think I'm controlling. You're right. I've spent 30 years controlling piles of laundry, kids' fevers at midnight, and dinner for 6 on a $10 budget. You think I'm aggressive because I argued over produce prices at the market, that money was the week's leftover grocery cash. And in case you're wondering, no, it wasn't your father who earned it. I saved it. I scraped it. I made it stretch. At the end, I even posted the address of the market and the vendor's stall number. I wanted to be completely transparent, no more shadows, no more secrets, no more shame. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Albert, his second call since I announced the divorce. I watched his name pulse across the screen, letting it ring 3 times before answering. I already knew what this was. He wasn't calling to ask if I was coming back. He was calling because the fire had finally caught up to him. "Barbara, take that damn video down." He exploded through the line, his voice pure fury. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear, my voice calm and cold. "I won't take it down. Everything I said was the truth. And in case you forgot, our cooling off period ends in 4 days. Once that judgment is filed, we're finished." Then I hung up. No hesitation. The comment section on my videos was still a battlefield. People were ripping into Albert and Judith, calling them fake, tearing into Emily for selling out her own mother, even dragging Connor into the trending tags. But none of it mattered anymore, not to me. I held tight to my winning lottery ticket. Just 4 more days, and I wouldn't just be cashing in a prize. I'd be turning the page on the last chapter of my life and beginning a new one. These past 2 weeks of living on my own had been the lightest, quietest, most peaceful days I'd had in decades. No one barking for dinner, no one interrupting my thoughts, no one judging me for haggling over produce, as if that made me less worthy of respect. For the first time, I was telling my own story, with my own voice, backed by irrefutable evidence. I wasn't a villain, and I wasn't a victim. I was a woman who had finally decided to stand up for herself, even if it meant standing alone. The morning after I received my divorce decree, I booked a train ticket and headed to the Oregon Lottery office in Portland. As I settled into my window seat on the Amtrak, I watched the landscape rush by bridges spanning wide rivers, small towns with their quaint main streets, forests dense with pine and maple. The world flickered past like a celebration stage just for me. For the first time in decades, I felt it in my bones. The world really was bigger than kitchens and laundry rooms. The Portland sky was a shade of blue I hadn't seen in years. The buildings stood taller. The sidewalks seemed cleaner. The people moved with purpose and energy. I instinctively touched my hair, suddenly self-conscious about how small town I must look in this urban setting, then smiled to myself because now I had the means to catch up with the world that had moved on without me. At the Lottery Claim Center, I signed the paperwork with steady hands, sat through a tax briefing that would have made Frank's eyes glaze over, and even agreed to a local TV interview in front of the camera. I wore my new wool coat, the first piece of clothing I'd bought myself in years that cost more than $50, and spoke with a calm that I'd earned the hard way. I'd like to donate a portion of the winnings to a women's shelter, I said, surprising even myself with the clarity of my decision. There are still so many women in this city who feel trapped like I once did. I want them to know there is a way out. Right then and there, I wrote a check for $100, $1,000 to Safe Harbor Women's Network. The interviewer's eyes widened slightly. That was a full tenth of my winnings. But I knew what I was doing. This money wasn't just currency, it was freedom. And freedom, I had learned, was meant to be shared. After the segment aired, people flooded my new social media account. This woman is the real winner, divorced, won the lottery, and turned around and gave back. Icon. This is what female empowerment really looks like. Please, I beg you, start a podcast. I will kneel to hear your marriage story. Good luck vibes. Grandma, please drop your hair color and coat links. And they were right, I did have so much more to give. Not just money, but experience. Not just sympathy, but solidarity. Every woman who watched my story and recognized her own silent suffering deserved to know that there was light on the other side of that closed kitchen door. The donation wasn't just about helping strangers. It was about honoring the woman I had been the one who checked price tags and argued over produce costs, who stretched every dollar until it screamed, who saved in secret and sacrificed in silence. That woman deserved recognition. She deserved respect. And now, she could finally give herself both. When the shelter director called to thank me, her voice thick with emotion, she asked what had prompted such generosity. I spent 40 years believing I couldn't leave because I had nowhere to go. I told her simply, I don't want another woman to stay one more night in a place where she's invisible because she thinks there's no alternative. The director paused, then said softly, Mrs. Mitchell, would you consider speaking at our fundraising gala next month? Your story could inspire others. I thought about all the dinners I'd prepared without thanks, all the birthdays I'd orchestrated without recognition, all the years I'd given without reciprocation. I thought about how Frank and Caroline were building their perfect romance on the foundation of my erased existence. I thought about how Elizabeth had chosen sides without hesitation. Yes, I said, warmth spreading through my chest where the burn was still healing. I'd be honored to share my story. The truth was, I wasn't just starting over at 67. I was finding purpose, turning my pain into a bridge that other women could cross to find their own way forward. I went to places I'd only seen on television before. The hot springs of Yellowstone shimmered like spilled paint from the sky, steam rising in ghostly columns against the crisp mountain air. The northern lights in Alaska weren't just filters on a screen, but curtains of green and purple dancing across the vast darkness, so beautiful they made my eyes water. The ocean breeze in Key West carried the scent of salt and possibility as it brushed against my face. Standing on those shores, watching pelicans dive for fish and palm trees sway against the setting sun, I finally understood 67 wasn't late. It was perfect timing. I had the wisdom to appreciate every moment and the freedom to choose which moments I wanted to experience. After months of exploring, I found myself drawn to a small lakeside town where the air smelled like pine and the evening light danced across the water in ribbons of gold. On my second day there, I walked past a cozy 2-bedroom cottage with a for sale sign in the yard. The realtor, a woman about my age with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around her eyes, recognized me immediately. "You're that woman from the videos," she said, extending her hand. "The one who donated to the women's shelter. I've been following your journey." 2 weeks later, I signed the closing papers. The house wasn't large or grand, but it had character wooden floors that creaked in just the right way, a kitchen with windows that framed every sunset, and a small balcony that soon bloomed with lavender and mint. For the first time in decades, I didn't need to consult anyone about paint colors or furniture placement. I chose a soft sage for the living room walls and a deep teal for my bedroom. I hung artwork that spoke to me not because it matched the sofa or because guests might approve, but because each piece made my heart lift when I looked at it. On my third day in the house, a gray and white stray cat appeared on my porch, eyeing me warily as I gardened. I left out a saucer of milk, then some tuna, and gradually he began to trust me. I named him Charlie. Unlike Henry, who had demanded constant attention and validation, Charlie didn't beg for affection. He spent most of the day lounging behind the curtains, chasing dust motes and sunbeams. But every night, like clockwork, he curled up by the door, guarding my sleep as if he knew that some hearts go too long without a home and need something small and warm to stand watch. I signed up as a community volunteer grocery runs for the elderly, hospital visits, baking for town events. At first, people called me the new lady or Eleanor from the lake house, but soon I became our Eleanor. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be needed, not used. My days grew quiet, simple, clean like freshly washed linen hung in the sun, days that didn't leave stains on my spirit or calluses on my heart. I planted a garden, joined a book club, took pottery classes at the community center. I learned to kayak on the still morning waters of the lake and discovered I had a talent for watercolor painting, something Henry had scoffed at years ago when I'd mentioned wanting to try it. "At your age," he'd said, "what's the point of starting something like that now?" The point, I discovered, was joy, pure, uncomplicated joy that belonged entirely to me. Every stroke of the brush, every ripple of the kayak paddle through clear water, every new friendship formed without apology or pretense, these were the treasures I denied myself for too long. I hung my first completed painting a sunset over the lake above my fireplace, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine, because at 67, I'd finally learned that life doesn't end when someone stops loving you. Sometimes, that's exactly when it begins. The calls started coming about 3 months after I'd settled into my lakeside home. My phone lit up with Vanessa's name, my daughter, who hadn't bothered to check if I was all right after I walked out that day, burns still fresh on my chest. I let it ring twice before answering, curious what had finally prompted her to reach out. "Mom." Her voice had that familiar sugar-coated tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you? We've been so worried." I smiled faintly, stirring honey into my tea as I sat on my porch, watching the morning fog drift across the lake. That's interesting. I don't remember receiving any concerned messages after I left with second-degree burns. There was a pause. Then she cleared her throat. "Look, Mom, that day was complicated for everyone, but that's not why I'm calling." She hesitated before continuing. "We saw the news about your lottery win and that donation you made to the women's shelter. That was generous." The way she emphasized generous made my skin prickle. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. "Mom," she finally continued, "why didn't you tell us you won the lottery? That donation, you could have bought a house in the city with that money." I took a slow sip of tea before responding. I did buy a house, Vanessa, a lovely one by a lake where I can watch the sunrise every morning. "Yes, but..." She paused again. I could almost see her calculating her next words. "That money could have helped all of us. Jackson has college to think about. And Andrew and I have been looking at properties closer to the good school district." In the background, I heard Jackson's voice, high and clear. "Grandma, I miss you. When are you coming home?" My grandson's words should have tugged at my heart, but instead, I felt a chill. They were using him, coaching him to soften me up. "You've got a new grandma now, don't you?" I replied coolly. "You shouldn't mix them up." There was a long pause on the line before Vanessa snatched the phone back, irritation bleeding into her voice. "Mom, you're 67 years old. You shouldn't be playing social media games. That money should be for Jackson and for your security when you're older." I looked out at the water, watching a blue heron glide across the surface, wings outstretched in perfect balance. My crawfish étouffée, a recipe I'd learned in New Orleans during my travels, had gone cold on the table beside me. "You know," I sighed, taking another sip of tea, "it's funny. Every time one of you calls, I lose my appetite." I leaned back in my rocking chair and said, calm and clear, "Don't worry, Vanessa, when I die, you won't have to fight over anything. I've already written my will. Every cent is being donated to the women's shelter." She gasped. "Mom, you can't be serious. That's Jackson's inheritance you're talking about." "No," I corrected her. "That's my money. Money I won after spending 40 years making sure everyone else's needs were met before my own. Money I earned the right to do with as I please." "But family," she started. "Was that what you all were to me when Christopher brought his high school sweetheart to my table? When Jackson threw hot chocolate on me and you blamed me for his tantrum? When no one visited me in the hospital while I was being treated for burns?" My voice remained steady, despite the memories that still stung. "Family shows up, Vanessa. Family sees you. Family stands by you when everyone else is tearing you down." I hung up the phone and blocked her number. She tried calling again from Andrew's phone later that evening. I blocked that one too. Sometimes I peek at her public posts for entertainment, scrolling like I would through a comedy feed. The internet has a name for people like her, now digital pets. Those who don't make a sound unless you click on them. That's what she is to me now. Something I can choose to engage with or not. For the first time in my life, the choice is entirely mine. A few months later, I noticed something curious happening online. Richard and Pamela's videos had stopped updating. At first, it was just radio silence on their channel, no new silver love content, no heartwarming cooking sessions in my former kitchen. Then someone on a local forum shared what they called the tea, Pamela had moved back in with her sister, and Richard was showing up solo at community events, looking considerably less polished than he had on their viral videos. No official announcement. No heartfelt post explaining the separation, just a curtain dropping quietly on a performance that had ended too soon. The great second chance romance, the high school butterflies that had grown roots, had apparently withered faster than anyone expected. I was in my garden, pruning roses I'd planted that spring, when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I'd blocked months earlier. Somehow, Richard had gotten a new number. I stared at the screen for a moment, curiosity winning over indifference, before answering. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Evelyn?" His voice sounded different, smaller somehow, less assured. "How have you been?" I sat back on my heels, looking out over the vibrant flower beds I'd cultivated with my own hands, at the hummingbirds darting between the feeders I'd hung from the eaves of my porch. "I'm doing well, Richard. Better than I expected, actually." He cleared his throat, forcing a casual tone that didn't quite land. "Yeah. You look good in those pictures online. The traveling and all that. Seems like you're enjoying yourself." I waited, knowing there was more coming. Richard never called just to check in, especially not after our divorce had been finalized, and my social media posts about my new life had gone viral. "Listen," he finally continued. "I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about everything that happened." I pulled off my gardening gloves, giving him my full attention now. "Oh, Pamela and I." He hesitated. "Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. She wasn't who I remembered. Or maybe I wasn't who she wanted." He laughed, a hollow sound. "Turns out living with someone is different than remembering them from high school." I said nothing, letting the silence fill the space between us. "Anyway," he went on, his voice taking on that familiar cajoling tone he'd used whenever he wanted something from me. "I've been thinking that maybe we were too hasty. 40 years is a long time. Evelyn, that means something. We have history, a daughter, a grandson." I watched a monarch butterfly land on one of my zinnias, its orange wings catching the afternoon light. "What exactly are you saying, Richard?" His voice brightened, mistaking my question for interest. "I just thought maybe there's still a chance for us. The house feels empty without you. And I saw those recipes you posted online. They made me realize how much I miss your cooking." There it was. Not that he missed me, but that he missed what I did for him, my service, my labor, my dedication to his comfort. "I'm in Alaska right now," I lied smoothly, though I was actually just 30 miles from our old house. "Watching the northern lights, signal's not great, got to go." Before he could respond, I ended the call and blocked his new number. Then I snapped a photo of my flourishing garden and posted it online with the caption, "Growing things that nourish me." That evening, as I sat on my porch swing with a glass of Pinot Noir and watched the sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and rose, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction settle in my chest. The fairy tale romance Richard and Pamela had constructed online had crumbled under the weight of reality. Meanwhile, I was building something far more substantial, a life that didn't depend on anyone else's validation to be meaningful. I didn't need Richard to tell me who I was, what I should do, or whether I was worth anything. I had my own little house. Charlie, my cat, guarded the door at night. My neighbors dropped off extra muffins. I baked them apple pies in return. I woke up when I wanted. I slept peacefully. And I spoke only when I felt like it. Most importantly, I had finally retired from living their lives and started living my own. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the stars emerge one by one above the lake, I realized something profound had settled in my heart. At 67, I had finally found peace, not in someone else's arms or approval, but in my own quiet company. The journey hadn't been easy. Leaving a 40-year marriage, facing public humiliation when Jeffrey and Marianne created their perfect romance narrative online. Weathering Samantha's betrayal when she sided against me, each step had been painful, but each step had also been necessary. Now, my modest lakeside home fills me with more joy than our sprawling house ever did. My morning coffee tastes sweeter when I don't have to rush to serve someone else's breakfast. The garden I've planted blooms just for me. And Felix, my gray rescue cat, asks for nothing more than the occasional treat and gentle scratch behind his ears. I volunteer at the local library twice a week, reading to children who look at me with genuine interest. I've joined a painting class where my watercolors are praised, not criticized. I've made friends who invite me for dinner because they enjoy my company, not because they expect me to cook for them. For 40 years, I thought happiness meant making others happy at my own expense. I believed value came from service and sacrifice. I was wrong. True happiness comes when you finally recognize your own worth, when you understand that you deserve the same care and consideration you've always given to others. The most powerful lesson I've learned on this journey is this: it's never too late to choose yourself. So many of us, especially women of my generation, were taught that putting ourselves last was a virtue, that silencing our needs made us better wives, mothers, and grandmothers. We believed that our worth was measured by how much we could endure, how much we could give without complaint. But true strength isn't found in endless sacrifice. It's found in recognizing when relationships have become one-sided, when love has been replaced by expectation, when your presence is valued only for what you provide. I wish I could reach through this screen and hold your hand if you're in a place like I was, invisible, in your own home, taken for granted by the people who should cherish you most. I want you to know that another life is possible. Whether you're 37, 67, or 87, it's not too late to start again. Your story isn't over. In fact, the most beautiful chapter might be waiting just ahead, if only you have the courage to turn the page. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between pleasing others and honoring yourself? Or perhaps you've witnessed someone else's transformation after they finally chose their own happiness. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if these words touch something in you, please subscribe to join our community of late bloomers and second chance seekers. Together, we're rewriting what it means to find yourself, no matter how many years it took to get lost. Remember, the most authentic version of you is waiting, and she's worth discovering.